Hey, Knolly Williams here, the business healer. And in this episode, I get to share with you my humble beginnings, how I became the business healer, and how I now help you to make $250,000, $500,000, $1 million or more a year while working just 3 hours a day. Stay tuned. Well, all right. Knolly Williams here, and I want to welcome you to the inaugural first edition of the Business Healer podcast. I'm super excited to be with you, hanging out with you today. And I tell you, this podcast is over a year in the making. Yes, this is the podcast that I should have launched a year ago, but why didn't I? Well, there's a lot of fear and apathy surrounded when you are doing something new, and also when you are letting yourself be seen. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. I am the business healer, and I have literally helped tens of thousands, and we'll be coming into the hundreds of thousands with the release of my new book, 3 hours a day, of entrepreneurs. And we're talking business leaders, authors, coaches, speakers, trainers, content creators. And what I've noticed is that we all have a past. We all have a past, and that past can sometimes come in and haunt us. Well, I want to welcome you. I'm super excited to be launching this podcast. I know it's going to help you. It's going to help your business. It's going to help your family. It's going to help your mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical life as well. It's going to help you in all the areas of your business. And if you're just now finding this podcast, maybe this podcast has been on for years, you're just now discovering it, welcome to the podcast. If you're one of my early adopters, you're just kicking it off with me, you're launching with the business healer himself, Uncle Knolly, as I'm called. Welcome. Super excited. I made my first $1 million by the time I was 29, and I've had tons and tons of success in the business field. But I got to tell you, my story was not always so rosy. It was not always so pretty. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, back in 1970. And I was abused as a kid. I was an abused child. I was mentally, physically, emotionally abused by mom. And it's not something I really even love to talk about. And really, to be honest, the only reason I talk about it is because my coach was very frank in telling me, Knolly, you have to share your story. More people need to know, because a lot of people, they look at the success that I have now. I live in Puerto Rico. I have a beautiful home. I've got a beautiful wife of over 30 years, 31, coming on 31 years here as of this episode. And I've made tons and tons of money. I've just had a really, really good life, but life wasn't always this grand. It wasn't always this great. And so, I lived with a mom that the closest thing I could diagnose it, I don't know that she was ever diagnosed, was that she was bipolar, and she would beat us. I mean, I can remember morning after morning waking up from yet another extension cord beating with, painful, stinging welts on my arms and my legs and my back, and having to put on that long sleeve shirt and go to school and hope that the kids and the teacher wouldn't discover these scars, these that I had, and really make fun of me, or worse, I didn't really want to be misplaced. I didn't want to be taken out of my home. I know nowadays, for the way I was treated, you'd be taken from the home. And I love my mom. I loved her with all my heart. She was my mom. I didn't know any other. And so I didn't want that to happen. But it was very, very traumatic for me. I was a very sensitive kid. I was a very shy kid as well. And so I left home when I was 16. I ran away from home. And it's interesting. I just thought about that this year, that, even though I ran away from home, mom never came looking for me. That was interesting to have that epiphany. Even within the last few months, I was happy that she didn't, honestly at the time, but you know, as I get older, I'm thinking, you know, she never even sent anybody after me. She knew where I was. And I was pretty much at one point, I was going from house to house. I was in trouble with the law. I became a little criminal. But thank God at the age of 18, I found Jesus. I mended my ways, and I got on the straight and narrow. So what I want to do with this inaugural episode is I really want to sort of take you back. I want to share with you what this podcast is all about. And then I want to take you back on the timeline, the journey of me as an entrepreneur. And I know that you as an entrepreneur, a business owner, whether you've been in business for many, many years, or maybe you're just now getting into business, maybe you have a side hustle, maybe you still have a W-2, you know, whatever the case is, you know, I know that you're going to see bits and pieces of yourself in me, and I'm going to see bits and pieces of myself in you. And that's why I'm glad that we're having this time together. The big focus for me is helping you earn $250,000, $500,000, $1 million or more while working just 3 hours a day. And it is the lifestyle that I've lived for probably about the last decade. And many people have commented to me that they love my lifestyle. And so that's what I teach. I teach you how to live the life that I live and beyond. Okay, that's important, and beyond. I want you to surpass even what I've achieved on this realm. You know, today I own 3 six-figure businesses. I work 3 hours a day, and I'm dedicated to helping you get to where I am, and I'm dedicated to helping you really get beyond where I am. So I talked to you a little bit about my childhood. It was a mixed childhood. I mean, on one hand, I can't, you know, talk negatively, and I'm not really talking negatively about mom. I'm just telling you what happened, because I love my mom. She's a beautiful person. I love her. I love her. I was going to say love her to death, but I don't want to throw that out there. I love her. She's a great woman. I never, to be honest with you, I never bonded with her, and I never connected with her. You know, I was not breastfed, which is, you know, hey, I don't think many of the moms in the 1970s were breastfeeding. They came out with Similac and whatever else was out there. They said, hey, this is better than breast milk. And I know that that's one of the things that helps you bond, you know, with mom. And she wasn't just the warm fuzzy. She wasn't that kind of mother. But on the other hand, she would give us whatever we wanted. And this was kind of a paradoxical situation. You know, she would buy me whatever I wanted, honestly. She made good money. She had a master's degree. And of all things, she was in psychology, social work. She studied psychology in school. And in many ways, I feel like she used the study of psychology sort of against us. It's kind of that sort of, you know, my sister and I describe it when we talk together almost as like being in a POW camp was sort of the feel of growing up. But on one hand, and also my sister pointed this out this week when we were talking. On the other hand, it was like, you know, she was almost always pitting us against each other. So she always had a favorite. So either I was her favorite that week, or my sister was her favorite. You know, she had a flavor of the week, if you will. And she would let us know, oh, you know, and she would have us take sides against the other. So it was a very different way of growing up. Very, very different. But with that, what I want to get into, you know, I share that because I want you to understand that there's nothing special about me except that I was anointed just like you are. I was anointed and appointed to do the work that I do on the earth. You know, I can remember when I was 10 years old, my mom went to what I call now kind of a radical church. And I remember that there was a point in time where they would have altar call. And I remember one time I was sitting in church, and I was probably about 10 years old, maybe 9 or probably think about 10 years old. It was 1980. We had already moved to Los Angeles, which I was born in Brooklyn, New York, but I was raised in LA. My mom moved to South Central Los Angeles when I was 10. It took me and my sister. My mom and dad separated when I was about 7 years old. Super traumatic experience for me because honestly, dad was my protector. So he was the guy that kept mom from beating me, from beating us. But when he was no longer in the picture, sort of all hell broke loose, literally. And but we moved to California, and I remember one time we were in church, and she was one of those weird radical Christians, the kind that beat their kids but go to church every week, and play Christian music all day long. One of those, and I remember the pastor was given an altar call, and I remember this heat just came upon my body, and I get that every now and then. I get that, and particularly the heat comes for me when I'm resisting. So, like, at the very beginning when I was introducing myself here today on this podcast, I started feeling that heat because it was uncomfortable, being in front of you, whether you can see me or not, and I do record these both audio and video, but whether you can see me or not, this is you and I sitting down having a conversation. It's uncomfortable for me to do that because it's just not yet comfortable. I was the shyest kid in school. It's just the way that I'm particularly wired. Anyway, I remember I was sort of semi-sleep. I think I was probably in an alpha state, and I could hear what the preacher was saying, but my eyes were closed, and I was sort of in that alpha state, that state that you're in right before you wake up, or that right before you go to sleep. You're sort of in an enlightened, heightened state of awareness. And I remember he said, "Come down to the altar right now." And I just felt my body get up. And I was like, what is going on? This is, I don't want to get up. I don't want to go down there. And I just felt my legs moving, boom, boom, boom. And here I am walking down the aisle. And the heat was all over me. I was crying, and I gave my life to Christ. I gave my life to the Lord at 10 years old. And I remember going home from that, and I had a come to Jesus meeting in a self-improvised tent that I made from a sheet. Back then, we didn't have a lot of privacy. We had a small place, and I just made like a tent, and I pretended like I was asleep, but I was actually wrestling with God. And he was calling me like Moses. Now, I was an avid reader, okay? So I would read the scriptures, and when I was in 5th grade, I was reading on a sophomore college level, okay? I was an avid reader. Other subjects, not so great. And I absolutely hated school for the most part, except for English. I loved, reading. And I think one of the reasons why I loved reading so much was that reading took me to faraway places, and it allowed me to experience a different kind of life than the one I was living. It was an escape. It was a big escape for me. And the other reason I think I love reading so much, my sister actually pointed this out, is because when I was a young kid, I had a speech impediment. So when I was in, 1st grade, 2nd grade, I think even in the 3rd grade, I had a speech therapist because I was not a good speaker. I was terrible at speaking. And I just remember, again, at 10 years old, I remember that God was calling me. I read in scripture when Moses was being called to God's people, the children of Israel. He was being called to go to Egypt and confront Pharaoh and ask, well, not even ask Pharaoh. There was not even an ask in there. It was to demand that Pharaoh let God's people go. And I was appointed at that time as a prophet, as a teacher, as a leader, and as a deliverer, as a Messiah of sorts. Okay, not the Messiah, but as a Messiah of sorts for God's people, for his children. And who are God's children? Well, they're all over the place. Every nation, every tongue, every tribe, every people. Okay. And you could even say every religion. A lot of people wouldn't want to say that, but I say every religion, because Jesus said, I have other sheep that you know not of, and they're in other pens, and I'm going to get them too. And so the idea was that I was called at a very young age, but for most of my life, honestly, I have avoided the calling. I've forsaken the calling. I've wanted nothing to do with it. In fact, I wanted nothing to do with God at all. And still, there's days where I feel that way. Like, man, just leave me alone. Why are you picking on me? I remember when, and if that's uncomfortable for you to hear, I understand. I'm just being real with you. This is not a journey that it could be a journey that I pre-selected before this life. Okay. Yes, I believe that we pre-existed. If you're uncomfortable with that, I get it. But God came to Jeremiah. He said, I knew you before I created you in your mother's womb. I knew you. I knew you. Now, do you suppose that Jeremiah was the only person that God knew before he put him in the womb? No. This is the state of all mankind. Okay. And if you really, we won't get into that study today, but when you look at the word knew, when God said to Jeremiah, he said, I knew you before I created you in your mother's womb. The word knew, K-N-E-W, is the exact same word in Genesis where Adam knew Eve and they begot a son. Adam knew Eve. It's intimacy. Intimacy. Into me you see. Intimacy. Very, very, very deep. And I believe that God foreknew me. In fact, scripture says, whom he called, he also foreknew. And he, we basically, we've been called. We've been called. In fact, I should look up that scripture because it's a good one. It says, and this is Romans 8:29-30. It says, for whom he foreknew, he also predestined to become conformed to the image of his son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. And whom he predestined, these he also called. And whom he called, these he also justified. And whom he justified, these he also glorified. And if you've been called today, if you have been called and maybe you're a thousandaire, maybe you're a 100,000aire, maybe you're a millionaire, maybe you're a decamillionaire, maybe you're a multi-millionaire, maybe you're a billionaire, and you've been called, okay, just like I have. I haven't been called to preach the word of God from a pulpit. I'm the business healer. I preach the word in the business realm, the business sector, okay? And I wouldn't even say it so much preaching as I would say teaching and sharing. But, I do remember being called, and I, for a long time, did not accept the calling because I didn't want anything to do with it. But he said that whom he predestined, I was already pre-selected. You've been pre-selected. If you're listening to the sound of my voice, you haven't shut this podcast off yet, and you're resonating with this. You're like, man, this dude kind of sounds crazy, but I kind of feel him a little bit. If that's you, then you also have been predestined and pre-called and pre-selected, whether you like it or not. Okay. And I believe I had a hand in it. I've got a little bit of amnesia now. I don't really remember because God says he foreknew me. I don't recall that because I believe when you come into this realm, all that's kind of wiped out of your memory probably for very good reason, I would suspect. So I don't quite remember, but nevertheless, I have a mission upon the earth, just like you do. You have a purpose and a mission. And my mission is really to help business leaders, entrepreneurs have ease and flow. Okay. Write that down if you can. If you don't, just put that in your reticular activator, file that away in your brain. Okay. Just say, hey, brain, write this down. Okay. If you're working out right now, maybe you're going for a walk, maybe you're driving, you can't, do not get a pen and paper. Just take it easy. But have your brain write down ease and flow, because that's the state that is the natural state of mankind. That's the state that you desire. That's the state that you should be in. And the hustle and grind is not a natural state. That's not our natural state. That's not our destiny. The hustle and grind is good for a season, but it's not good for a lifetime. And many entrepreneurs will spend 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years in the muck and mire, the hustle and grind, in the weeds, in the maze, in the labyrinth. And that's not for you. That's not for you. Your destiny is ease and flow. Okay. And the hustle and grind is good for a season. I liken it to building a custom home. You know, my wife and I we live in a beautiful house. I'm turning my head to the left right now. I can see the ocean. Okay. Now I'm going to turn my head behind me. Boom. I can see the mountains back there. And it's a beautiful home in Puerto Rico. And I imagine this home took some time to build. And when the home was being built, that was the hustle and grind. But guess what? This house is no longer being built. It just has to be maintained. Okay. I can live in the house with ease and flow. And that's the same as your business. It's going to take hustle and grind and grit and determination and money and everything else to build your business. But once your business is built, which might take a year or 2, maybe 3 at the most, maybe 9 months, you should be able to enjoy your business. See, the purpose of your business is to serve you. The purpose of your business is to be your servant. Your business is your servant. And if that's not the kind of business you have, it's time for the business healer, baby. That's what I'm all about. With that, I'm going to sign off. I appreciate you. I love you. You might feel uncomfortable hearing that you are loved. I did. I didn't like hearing that I was loved because I didn't hear it growing up. But I do love you. You're the one that God has put to over my life, or within my life, to help, to steward. And I want to see you in success at a high level, the highest level that you deserve. And I guarantee it's high, much higher than what you've probably been reaching toward. Let's get to it. Hey, I love you, and I'll see you on the next episode. Over and out.